Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Debra Lynne Katz. Before I bring her on, I have to thank My Patriot Supply. They are, of course, the experts in emergency preparedness. The world has gone completely nutty, and it really couldn't hurt to have an emergency food supply. Thanks to My Patriot Supply, I have a 4-week supply of their awesome food. It stays good in storage for up to 25 years, and it tastes great. Right now, you get $70 off a 2-week supply and $100 off a 4-week supply of their food. Just click the link in the description, or you can visit preparewithfkn.com to get your supply today. Also, visit KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. She offers not only the best quality organite Zen domes and crystals, but the Quantum Health Transformation Program, where you can learn how to take back control of your mental, physical, and spiritual health. Just give her website a look, see what she has to offer. Most of the material there is completely free to download. That is KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. And finally, please subscribe to our backup channel on lbry.com. The link to that is in the description as well. It is our official YouTube backup channel. We're still fighting our podcast provider and trying to find a new one at the same time. They have, of course, demonetized us due to what it looks like is an error on their part, and they don't seem to be in any rush to fix the situation. In the meantime, our podcast is not making any money as long as they keep procrastinating. But it's thanks to those of you that support our sponsors and that have made donations that make us able to keep bringing you this show and these amazing guests until we're able to get this fixed. If you'd like to help out or support any of our sponsors, all those links are in the description, and you can also leave a donation. It's very much appreciated. You guys are what is keeping us going right now. Tonight, I want to welcome Debra Lynne Katz. She is an internationally renowned speaker and founder and director of the International School of Clairvoyance, one of the first online schools in the world to offer interactive small group clairvoyant training in teleseminar and webinar formats. She is an author of You Are Psychic, Extraordinary Psychic, and Freeing the Genie Within. She has been a professional clairvoyant healer medium for the past 25 years and is a parapsychologist and research subject. She has performed thousands of clairvoyant readings to help people understand more about themselves, their lives, and relationships. She is also an accomplished remote viewer, having assisted with financial forecasting, business consulting, finding lost objects, and occasionally crime solving, and even treasure hunting. She is currently a PhD student in psychology at the University of West Georgia and holds a master's degree in social work with a BA in psychology. Debra, welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm great, Chris. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here talking about all my favorite topics and having yourself and the listeners here who are also interested in these things where, it can be hard to find people who are. So I'm just so blessed to be here.
Definitely, yeah. I love talking about these types of topics. I believe psychic phenomenon and these abilities are actually something that everyone is capable of, but some more than others. It's just kind of like being good at a musical instrument or a sport. At least from what I've gathered from all my interviews and people I've spoken with and psychics that I've interacted with. I think that we were at one time an ancient advanced civilization that understood more about psychic abilities and the phenomenon than we may ever in our lifetime. And I also believe that we can communicate with other intelligence, whether it's earthbound spirits or possibly extra dimensional or celestial beings. I believe this based on my own personal experience. But tonight, let's talk about yours. When did you first realize that you had access to these abilities?
Well, I would say and I wouldn't even say it was access to them. It was just experiences when I was really super young. I have an identical twin sister named Amy, and we would we would always know what the other was thinking when we were apart from each other. We would know what the other one was doing, and even, if there was something kind of traumatic, or one time there was an accident, and we it was like we were tracking each other when we were apart from each other. And it got so crazy that even I think when, like, I was 8 or 9, I would just start to feel like I had to talk really fast, because if I didn't, she would say exactly what I was gonna say. And I couldn't tell who came up with a thought first. I just knew it was like we were sharing thoughts. And then just one person would say what the other was thinking. And then we would also communicate with each other in our dreams sometimes as well. So we were really interested in these topics because of these experiences. And at first we didn't have names or language for it. It was just normal. And then as we got older, we realized that this wasn't something that everybody was experiencing, or at least that they weren't to this extent, I would say. I'm right there with you. I totally believe that I think everybody is being psychic all the time. It's just they don't realize it. They just think their thoughts are isolated within themselves, and not realizing that just ideas and creativity and emotions are oftentimes coming from other people. So I think we just realized it a little sooner.
So, would you say there is this kind of collective consciousness that we all share and have access to?
Well, I would say that as far as a collective consciousness, well, we're all open systems, so we can feel each other's pain. We could feel each other's body sensations, thoughts, feelings. So I think it gets into like, who are we, what we're not these closed systems. We're actually open systems, and we extend further than what the eye can see with the physical body. So yeah, and I would say that we're all part of the same fabric. And it's just like if you took a blanket and you shook one end, the other end is going to reverberate from it. And that's how we can't not impact each other in different ways. And of course, some people are more sensitive. Some people are, if you're already really connected or emotionally tuned into someone, you're going to have more communications with them. Also, some people are louder. So, some people talk a lot in regular life, and in telepathically, people talk a lot. And telepathically, some people are really loud and some people are quiet. In the same way, spirits are entities, spirits, whatever you want to call them. Some are really noisy and can get their messages across really well, and others can barely at all. And so all of this impacts whether or not any one individual is going to be receiving communication or even aware of it.
Now, a few of your abilities are described as clairvoyant, medium, and healer. Maybe we can go through each of those and kind of break those down for people who aren't really familiar. What a clairvoyant is versus a medium versus a healer. If you could tell us maybe the difference between those.
Sure. Well, and I do like to be specific with these terms. And so, as far as I would say, I would call myself a clairvoyant first and foremost, because when I first, and I should backtrack just a little bit. So I had these experiences growing up, but I had no idea how to control this. I never in a million years thought I would eventually become someone who could do readings for people or get information. But I ended up going to a train through school basically for a couple years, a very intensive clairvoyant training program. And there was a focus on the visual. So even though all the other psychic abilities like clairsentience, which is feeling information or feeling other people's emotions. It's also called empathy or being an empath, like that would come through, or claircognizance, instant knowing. When you use one ability, you can't, it's not like you're going to shut off the other ones, but you can have different ones be dominant. So when I went through a clairvoyant program, I really took it literally that my goal was to be getting information visually, and that's exactly what happened. So see I would see pictures, colors, anything through visual means. Now, a lot of times, especially at first, I had no idea what any of this stuff meant. And that's very common when people start to develop their clairvoyance, is you just start to get information in these pictures and they're symbolic and have no idea what they mean. But over time, they start to make sense. You start to get used to them. Sometimes then a knowingness comes with the pictures. So I went through training to be visually oriented, getting psychic information on a visual level, and then I practiced it, and I really focused on the visual for years. And then at some point I decided, it seems like I've got this down pretty well, but it would be really cool to be able to hear people more on a telepathic level stronger. So then I just set my intention and it was easy to do because I was already doing readings with people. So I had lots of practice opportunities, because that's really the key, is having the chance to practice on whether on people or targets or different things. Most people don't even practice ever, or try ever, so they to do it intentionally, and they don't really even know how to get started. So it really is something that you can learn. But so with telepathy, I just said I want to start to hear more clearly, and it just started to happen, and then I just worked with it, and it got clearer and clearer, especially over the last few years. So I look at these where you can isolate them, kind of like a muscle or a particular tech area. Well, they're techniques, but also just focusing on them above the other ones, but then the other ones are going to come through as well. So I love visual approaches. It's really fun. It's as if you're watching a movie, really, when you look at people's lives or different events or activities or things like that. And you can have a lot of fun with them. And so then, so that's clairvoyance. And if you'd like one example, a symbol I've just started to work with, because I watched that. Have you seen the show, The Queen's Gambit?
No, I've been meaning to check it out though.
Yeah, it was a really great mini series about this girl that has she was an orphan, and then she becomes this master chess player, and it takes place like through the, I think, through the 50s, through the 70s or so. So it was, and in the show, as a girl, she's at this orphanage, and they give her tranquilizers they sedate all the kids. It's pretty scary, but so she's laying in bed, this little girl drugged, and she looks up at her ceiling, and she sees this giant chessboard, and then she's playing chess in her in her head, and all the pieces are moving around, and that's how she learns how to play chess. So what in the approaches that I'm using different symbols. And then I look to see how the symbols are applied to each person. And so one symbol that I, for many years, have used is a symbol of a flower. So someone says their name, and then I think of their energy coming through their name into the flower, and then the flower starts to change and do things. And then you just describe the flower, and then you hone in on the different, like if it's getting bigger or if it's turning colors or a petal is falling off. So that's like one way to focus your attention and then start to hone in on different aspects of the flower, and the different aspects will relate to the person. But so after I saw, getting back to the chessboard, this was maybe just even a month ago, after I saw the chessboard, I thought, well, that's a great symbol. It's so rich in so many things, obviously already associated with the chessboard. We have all the different pieces with the different meanings and relationships and the board itself. So I said, I'm going to try to use this as a symbol to get information about things. And so I wanted to know about what's going to be happening in January. So making some future predictions about life ahead. And I saw an image of the chessboard and I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's already like integrating into my subconscious. And when I looked at the chessboard, suddenly the whole board, it started folding up and crumbled. So uh so then from there I focused on it, and it was showing me like a financial collapse. So we could get into that later, but I was surprised because I thought I was going to see the pieces moving. I didn't expect to see the whole board itself collapse. But this is just an example of clairvoyance and how it can be really cool to work with these different images. So this, I would say, is my specialty.
Yeah, I do want to get into what you had just your vision on the chessboard collapsing a little later. Um, you also are a medium. Explain a little bit about what's the difference between medium and clairvoyance.
Yeah, and I would say there's different kinds of mediums too, so we could get into that, different kinds of mediumship.
Yeah, sure.
But overall, I would say with a medium is attempting to access information from a deceased person or non-living entity. So there's a difference between, I think of it like, okay, if I want to, let's say something's going on outside my house and I want to know what it is. I can like just look outside and see for myself, or I can have someone come in and tell me what happened outside and, give me their take on things and their opinion. So that would be like in regular life, an analogy with in our psychic work, we can look directly at things like with our own vision, or we can have people come, deceased people come and tell us things so they can help us out. So there's both of those things. And whether, regardless of what you call yourself, if you're reading people, people have different spirits around them. So I didn't start out trying to like saying, oh, I want to read dead people, or I want to do mediumship. I actually didn't want to do mediumship. I would have been very happy to not have spirits come around. This was like 25 years ago. The whole thing used to really freaked me out because I saw way too many scary movies and had some different experiences myself. So when I was reading people, I was not interested in like seeing the deceased people around them, but it just would happen. So, and I found out later two things. It would happen because even if they're not wanting to know about them, they're still around them. Now they don't come up all the time, but sometimes they really are very present. So whatever is present around a person to a clairvoyant, that's going to become obvious. The other thing that to me is almost even more interesting is the level of energy of living people that are around people. So it's not just deceased people, but it's all the living people that are around them that show up in their fields. And this could be people they live with, but it could be people they haven't even talked to in a long time, but that person's energy is still around them and having an impact on them. And that will show up around the person. So we're very much impacted, each one of us, by the different people and spirits that are around us, because again, they can have an impact on our mood, on how we think about ourselves, how we think about our ideas, our um, things, our anxieties. These can all be impacted by these different energies around us. And I had no idea about that until I would start to read someone and I would see, like, oh, there's some green over here above your head. And then there's like a splotch of dark red. And when I tune into it, it seems angry. And then I see this woman and here's her name and she's like doing, it turns out it's like the person's mother who's like giving them a really hard time. And her energy is there. And then, and you asked about healing. So the healing part is, and this is where clairvoyance and healing really go very well together, because if you see, say, like this red streak in someone's field and it's all this anger coming from someone, and then you tune in to see, well, what impact is it having on my client? And oh, it's just making them feel bad about themselves. They keep obsessing about this person or situation, or that it's you can see where it's impacting them. Maybe it's like giving them a headache on the left side of their head. So then, but it started off first seeing it as like a color, because energy shows up as color. So I started off seeing the red, and then I got the pictures to give me what I'd call the higher level information. But if I want to help the person, sometimes this will just spontaneously happen. Whereas I'm talking about the color will just start to move out. And I think it's the person, their intention. They're like, oh, that I don't want this around me. And so it just starts to move out. And then I don't have to do anything. So just looking at it and then even communicating it help move it. But other times, if it's not moving, the clairvoyant could help visualize the energy moving out. And just like you would kind of pantomime, or just, I mean, it sounds absolutely crazy that this could be possible, that you could just visualize something around a person, a color or energy, and see it moving away, and then it has an effect. But the way that I learned that this had an effect was I would be doing this sometimes with people where I hadn't told them. I hadn't told them, like, oh, I see all this black in your aura or all this white in your aura, and now I'm just gonna move it away. I would start to work on it in a certain place, and they would be like, wow, I can feel, it almost feels like you're or something's pulling. They didn't know it was me, so it was like there's something coming out of my solar plexus right now, and that's where I would be working. Or oh, it feels like something is getting pulled out of my head, and that's also where I would be working. So I realized that this was not just like me visualizing things, that they could, if they could sometimes feel what I was doing, there was something real going on here. So I would say there's many different kinds of energy healing. There's many different kinds of mediumship, but that's a general overview.
Very cool. Now, I want to go back to something you were talking about, how these spirits can actually affect people's daily lives, their mood, what's going on in their lives. How common is this? And do you think this happens with everyone? Does everyone have some sort of spiritual attachments, or is it just certain people with certain lifestyles? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, again, we have both living people and both deceased people around us. And so yes, some people have, I always go back to analogies in life. It's like, so some of your listeners, they have people that, are super dependent on them, are very attached to them. Maybe they want to not be with that person, but that person won't let go of them, or vice versa. So I've actually seen spirits in people's fields, and the spirits didn't want to be there. The spirits wanted to go, and the living person did not want to let them go. And in a couple times when I explained to my client that this spirit, like it was suffering being with them, and they were like, no, absolutely, like, I don't want you to help them on, I'm not ready to let go of them, I want them here. So it could work both ways. But yes, there are occasionally where people do have negative attachments, whether it's people that they knew or just kind of, you might call them like a hitchhiker. I have a feeling you have a lot of information about this area, Chris. So I'm sure that you probably have some just knowledge in this area. But I would just say that these, yes, they can be difficult for some people. And I've had some very weird experiences. And I'll just tell you one example. I was one morning I woke up and I heard in my head, like as if someone was yelling profanities. And this is not something I typically hear. And one of the things that is helpful is if you know what your baseline is, like if you, and this is where meditation and just finding ways to be typically in a good state is helpful. So if you typically like are pretty, clear minded, not too much mind chatter, pretty stable on an emotional level, then when there are other energies around, it's easier to perceive them. So in this one morning, I was hearing profanities, like someone was yelling them at me. And I've had this before, but it had been a while ago. So I was just, and not usually like when I was sleeping, it was usually during the course of a reading where I already had a client with me. So when this happened, I was just like, oh, great. I have too much going on to like want to even deal with this. But I heard it again. So I was just like, okay, who is this? I don't have time for this. Who is this? And this guy started to talk, and I couldn't really hear what he was saying, but I had this weird feeling like he was a gay guy. And like there was something about homosexuality. And then there was also, so, and then I got a sense that it had to do with my client who I was going to read later that night. Now, this was a new client. I had never read him before. I knew his sister, and they were both dentists. So we got onto and I knew that he didn't even like hardly believe in this stuff. But his sister had said he should come for a reading. So I get on the phone with the guy that night, the dentist, and so I just start reading him, and I start to get a sense that there's been this entity around him, and that it's been trying to tell him that it's like in charge of him. It's like I felt like this entity was saying that it was God, but it wasn't God. And so I'm telling the guy this, and I'm thinking, he must think I just sound nuts. And he said, oh my God, like this was why I came for the reading, because I started getting communications months ago, and I did think it was God, because I didn't know that you could have communications with spirits. I thought it was just God. And then it started saying sexual things, like gay sexual things to him, like it wanted to have sex with him, but he didn't think of himself as gay. But the spirit was like trying to get him to do different types of homosexual acts, and at the same time like giving over his authority to him. And it wanted him to, it was tied into him. He started to do what's the gas at the dentist have, the nitrous
Yeah,
oxide?
nitrous. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, it seemed to like it when he did nitrous. And so he was doing it, and he became addicted. And then And so anyway, I could go on, but actually the guy, he ended up dying like some months later. So not a happy ending, but the point is I had a sense of the spirit hours before I read the guy, and the spirit had been with this guy and was really wreaking havoc in his life. And a lot of times this gets to the topic of people. um, I guess it's just like anybody else. You get into a relationship, you trust the person, and sometimes it turns out that you shouldn't have given them so much trust. And that can definitely happen with spirits, in the same way that you could, not trust a spirit and find out that they're really there for you, or they're helping you with a lot of things in your life. And a lot of people are just so scared about these topics that they never reach that understanding. And they may still have the spirit helping them out, but it's almost like they don't get the benefit of knowing that they're being helped out, because they're just so freaked out about it, they don't want to even think about it. And they actually have a lot more help than they realize.
And you would think that a lot of our influences, like everyday influences, like creativity, whether it be artistic or just things that pop into our head that we don't know where it came from, could possibly be coming from the spirit world as well.
Yes. Now it can come again from both places. So not too long ago, maybe about a year ago or so, I was at the University of Illinois Special Collections Library and came across a few little books that Mark Twain had written in the late 1800s, and one was called Mental Telegraphy. Have you heard of his book, Mental Telegraphy?
I have. Have not read it.
Yeah, so it's really quite short, and in the library they had the original version, the one of the first printed ones, which was really cool. But so I had no idea that Mark Twain was not only a believer in telepathy, but he wrote about it, and he really honed this ability in himself. And he has these great stories where, speaking to this question about creativity, because he had the first time he realized this happened, he started to have an idea, and it was a creative idea. It was an idea for a particular, forget what it was, but it was something that he thought a book should be written about, a certain topic. But he said this was not a topic that he was really that knowledgeable in or that interested in, but he started obsessing about writing this book about this subject. And then he thought, I'm not really the one who should write this. I knew this guy 10 years ago in the United States, because at this point, Mark Twain was in the UK, and this was the late 1800s. So they had to travel by ship, and it took months and months for letters to get back and forth. So he started, and he said it was as if he was obsessed about it, because he kept thinking about it, and he thought, this guy used to know, I don't even know if he's still alive, but he would be the perfect one to write this book. So he wrote a letter to him, but then he put it in his drawer, because he thought, well, I should try to secure a publisher for him first before I get him excited about this idea, if he's even still alive to do this. So he put the letter away, and then like 2 days later, a letter arrived, and it was from this guy in the United States. It had taken months to get there. And I'm bringing this up because it's a lot easier when it's so slow, when communication has to, when we could see these dates of that guy had to have sent his letter to Mark Twain months before. But the guy wrote to him, and it was so close to what Mark Twain had been thinking about. It was the exact idea that had come to him. And the guy said, I have this idea. I want to write a book, and I know you can help me find a publisher. So will you help me with this idea? And so Mark Twain said at that point, he realized how much of his own creative ideas could be coming from someone else, and that he could not in that moment distinguish between the two. Over time, he started to be able to learn more because of some signs. And I was so excited to find his book, because this is exactly what I've found as well, that I was oftentimes channeling other people's ideas. So I would call them up and say, hey, I just got this great idea. Do you want to do this with me? Like a film project or something. And they'd be like, I've been working on that for weeks, and I was thinking of maybe inviting you on the project, but not so sure. So it's like stealing people's ideas and not realizing it. The other side of that is not just with creative ideas, but it's offering to help people. And I find this with like a lot of my especially female clients. So it's like anticipating people's needs, what they want, and then offering to do what they want or help them. And that might sound nice and everything, but it starts to get so many so often that's happening, that it's easy for a person to even lose track of, like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to offer to work on this, help this person? Like, what do I want versus what everyone else wants? It just gets so blended together that it can be really, really challenging. And this is where I think so many people do both of these things all the time. It's anticipating what people want in advance.
Yeah, that's interesting, and now that I think back, I can find myself doing that in my own life quite a few times. It's very thought-provoking to think that how our thoughts can be affected by these outside influences. I wanted to ask you also. You have done some remote viewing, and you've also helped with some investigations and finding objects and things like that. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely obsessed with remote viewing. And so I do it, I teach it, I research it. And remote viewing is so cool because you can, with a lot of tasks, you can get feedback right away. And so when you're reading people, you might get some feedback from them, saying, oh, this makes sense, or you hear from them, but it's not as concrete as, say, if you're tuning into a photograph and then you get to see the photograph a short time later, or sometime in the future, tuning into a video or an object or something like that. So there's something very, very exciting about, especially the moment when you get to see how you did. And then also just the experience of remote viewing. There's some really cool things that happen in the course of doing it. Now, not always, but just there's a term that was conceived of by Ingo Swann, and the term is aesthetic impact. And this term refers to what happens when you're tuned into some kind of target, like a location, or usually it's like location based, I would say, but where you're there and suddenly you have like a moment of experiencing yourself at the location. So it's not like it could almost go into like a full-blown OBE or out of body experience, but usually it's not that intense. It's just a moment where you suddenly like feel like something at the location is really big, like it's looming over you, or you get like bright sunlight in your eyes, or you suddenly like feel water. Like I've had the feeling when the target was like an ocean of just water just suddenly splashed up on me. Or I tune into a target and I had no idea there were people there, but then I start like feeling like a heartbeat, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there is a person here, because I'm feeling their heartbeat. And one time I was given a target. And in these cases, usually people are working blind. So blind means we don't know all we know is it's a location. We don't know anything else. We're just given a random target number that's paired with a location. So it could be anything in the whole universe. And so one time I was just kind of going along, and suddenly I had the weirdest sensation, as if I was lying on the ground and I was wearing a suit of armor and I had swords stuck into my chest. And it didn't hurt. It wasn't scary. I was just like, oh, I'm lying on the ground with armor and I've got swords in my chest. It just happened for a second, but I experienced it as if it was me. And that was, it was really fun. When do you get to, it's kind of like being in a movie. And then it turned out that the target was a medieval, some kind of medieval castle location where, it made sense that there were knights and swords and stuff. I actually, though, in that session, I didn't see the castle. I just kind of got distracted with what was going on with myself, which can sometimes, those when you have experiences like that, you kind of can get a little off like what you're really supposed to be describing because you're just having fun with it. So yeah, that's why I really like remote viewing. And it's something that is pretty easy for really most people to learn. Now, some people catch on faster than others. Some people have an easier time with it because some people do have naturally like very symbolic thinking, and sometimes they'll start generating symbols that um, are, there's like bits and pieces. There's aspects to the symbols that are correct, but then the symbols take them off track. And so usually people start to work that out as they practice, and get some training too can help with that. But yeah, it's something, and it's something that you can have your kids do, that you can have just anyone can do without like a lot of training or preparation.
That's very cool. Could you tell us about maybe one of your more successful remote viewing sessions where you actually, is helped with an investigation or found something, something along those lines?
Sure. Well, I would say probably one that I'm still a little bit surprised about, what was just in my own life, or for myself and my husband, where this was maybe a little over, maybe a year and a half ago. And we had gone, we lived out in the California desert at that time on a property that was about 2.5 acres. And and I was going back and forth to graduate school from California to Georgia. And we had to go back to Georgia to the East Coast. And then we were going to do this whole trip. So we were going to be gone. We were gone for about a month. And we came back, and my husband said that he couldn't find his truck keys. And he had a semi truck parked there, and he couldn't find the keys. And so I said, okay, well, I'll go look for them. And by now he's used to, like, when we first got together and I said I was going to help him look for something, he would be really surprised that I then went and sat down and closed my eyes, and that's how I was looking. He didn't expect that. It's like, I thought you were going to help me look. And I'm like, I am, but internally. So by now he was used to this. So I closed my eyes and I saw this, this image of this little animal statue. And I knew where the little animal statue was. So I just went over and looked, and I didn't see any keys there. And then I said, okay, well, I really needed to look better. So I closed my eyes again, and I saw a birdhouse this time. And I went to look for the birdhouse, and I couldn't find it. And then I realized that it had been right over by where that animal statue was, but it had been removed a few months before. So I still didn't see any keys. So I closed my eyes one more time. And this time I saw a cover of like a sprinkler cover, like an underground sprinkler cover. And then I realized that the little animal statue and where the birdhouse had been was that statue was sitting on the cover. So I went over there and I took off the statue, I lifted up the cover, and I looked into the hole in the ground. I didn't see anything, and I almost got up. And then I thought, no, I think I'll just stick my hand in there. And so now I'm sticking my hand like, a foot into the ground. And sure enough, there was the key. And
Wow.
so my husband had actually hid it in the sprinkler system. And yeah, and so to be able to find it underground in the desert, I thought was pretty cool. Now, there is no way I would have been able to do that if I hadn't had those very, very noticeable landmarks right there. And, that's the whole thing. And this in remote viewing, there's something called the search problem. And the search problem refers to that we can't help where things are located. If something's in the middle of an ocean, that's going to be a lot harder to find than if it's in a place where there's a one of a kind structure. Not to say that people can't find things in the middle of the ocean, because a couple decades ago, I think this was in the mid 70s, Ingo Swann, along with a researcher, Stephen Schwartz, Stephen was on a expedition with he actually had like a whole boat and crew, and they were looking, I'm trying to remember that they were on a couple different trips. They were looking for Christopher Columbus's ships, that two of the ships that had never been found. And then they were looking for some other sunken ships. And they actually, Ingo, with his psychic abilities, and Ingo is he is considered the father of remote viewing. He's the person who coined the term remote viewing. And Ingo actually got them to the spot. What they didn't think it was Christopher Columbus's ships, but he got them to where some shipwrecks were, right, and they were able to retrieve some of the materials. So even that is possible. I seriously doubt if I would be able to do that. But the search problem again refers to if it's you just can't help where things are located sometimes. And so it's really there's a psychic detective called her name is Pam Coronado. We're on the board together of the International Remote Viewing Association, and she was the former star of Sensing Murder. And we were talking a couple weeks ago at one of our meetings, and she was really excited because she said she works with all sorts of law enforcement. Like she's worked with like 50 different law enforcement agencies around the world. And she was all excited because she said most recently she's been working with the law enforcement officer in she lives in around Camarillo, California. And so this law enforcement agent wanted to know if she could find him in his house. And it was like an unpublished address. She had no idea where he lived. Logically, he knew that. So he set this whole thing up and he said, okay, I want you to remote view where I live and I want you to, find it. And she not only found it, but she drove up to his house and knocked on his door, and he opened up his door and she was standing there. And again, she said that the only way she was able to do that was because he had very, very distinct landmarks right outside his house. And she had recognized, she was able to, I don't know how she had recognized them, but maybe like they were on TV or something, and then it brought her right there. So she was very excited about that, and he was totally blown away that she had actually done it. Now she has like a whole search company, and she actually leads searches, because another thing about going out and like finding missing people or missing pets, which is a lot of times what remote viewers are asked to do constantly. Um, one of the problems is that, well, you could go and psychically get the information, but do you actually have the ability to go out and do the search? It can be expensive to fly somewhere and to start looking out in the woods or to start digging. Digs are very expensive, excavations are very expensive. Will you have access to the property of, where your missing pet is or where the body is? So there's a lot involved, and that's why it usually only works if it's not something like in my example where it was at my house, so I had control of the property. If it's not that situation, then usually it really needs to be working with law enforcement or people that have search capacities. But so Pam Coronado, she's really cool because she got really fed up with situations where she was very sure that if law enforcement went to a certain spot that they would find the body, but then uh, more often than not, they just didn't want to devote resources to it. So
Right.
she formed her own company, and so she's got resources now where they could actually go out and do the searches themselves, and have the psychics like go out as well. Because it's one thing to like if someone wants to know where something is, I'll like write up a whole report and send it to them. But I always feel a little bit handicapped, like, it just feels like if I could actually be there searching along with them with what I've already seen and then getting more and more, that it would be, more fruitful.
Definitely. And I definitely think that's something law enforcement should take closer look at, is the use of these of people like yourself with these abilities. I know some enforcement agencies do it, but others think it's too woo woo and they won't even touch it. But I think it's pretty profound when you look at a lot of the cases that have actually been solved by psychics or people with these intuitive abilities. I think it could make a huge difference. For the last few minutes that we have, I'd like to hear about, you've had some predictions for 2021. I'd love to hear about what kind of predictions you have for us.
Sure. Well, I'm still working on them. So what I do is just when I can't fall asleep at night or I wake up, I'll start to tune in. And so, yeah, let's see. And the thing is, I don't like to deliver bad news or things that are stressful. And I have to say, I've been, even today, because I tried to tune in last night, and from some of what I saw, it did make me depressed. Like I felt depressed today. So this isn't going to be all that rosy, because I know so many people were thinking, well, at least Democrats and some people not happy with the current administration were thinking, just life is just going to get so much better now.
Right.
And, with we'll soon have a vaccine and that'll all be great. And that's what I was thinking. But from what I'm seeing, so I do feel that there will be, because that image of that chessboard breaking apart, and then it seemed to have to do with our finances. So I do think that it won't happen before Christmas, but shortly. I'm anticipating maybe, well, I'm trying to remember if it was mid-January or no later than like mid-February, but that there was going to be like really a big financial um, crisis or collapse, and it was going to be pretty bad, and people were going to be confused because they they were going to be having a hard time getting to their money. And I couldn't, sometimes it is easy to kind of misinterpret things a little bit. So is it that they can't get their money from the banks, or that they're expecting checks, but they're not going to be able to get their checks? There's something that people are not going to be getting financially, and they're not really going to be understanding how the bigger system is working. And it seemed like there was a pretty big breakdown with that. So that didn't look good. And then in terms of the virus and the vaccine, I felt like that the vaccine is not going to be as readily available. It seemed like it was going to have to do with the infrastructure of like where the vaccine might get to places, but then for some reason the places can't handle I just heard that the infrastructure is not there to support massive vaccinations. So that was going to take a while. It was not going to be like right, maybe like later in the spring, but I did not see like where everyone was just going to be getting, if they wanted to, getting them in the way it's being put out. I admit I listen to CNN a lot, and they're, right now just like, oh, things are going to be great with this vaccine and everyone will be able to get it. And, of course, the drug companies are talking it up, but it just looks like, no, it's not going to be that simple. And also, I think that there's something about there's something wrong with the vaccine. The RNA part, which months ago when I was, because I've been tracking all of this for months. And so before there was any sign of the vaccine, I heard the words RNA. So I wasn't that surprised that RNA is a important part of what is being said with these two vaccines, the top vaccines right now that are being publicized, at least Pfizer and Moderna. But I feel that psychically what I've been getting is that there's something about the carrier within the RNA, a carrier that I'd call it the delivery system. So we could talk about two delivery systems, one delivery system in the body that brings whatever is in the vaccine to where it's supposed to go. That's not going to totally work all the time. So there's still more to it's not perfected yet, despite what they're saying. And then like I said, the delivery, maybe not the delivery system, but the infrastructure of once the vaccine is out. And I don't know, now this is my logical mind thinking, could this possibly be because they say that the vaccine has to be in a very cold environment, it has to be kept cold. So is that why the infrastructure isn't there to keep things that cold? Or I'm just not sure, but it's not going to be able to support as many people. And so then this gets to one other thing that I noticed recently that was a little upsetting. Well, I think there's going to be a lot of social unrest, and there's going to be some racial groups that are feeling, I don't know if this is the case, but there's going to be like the message put out that they're not getting access to the vaccine because of their ethnicity. And whether it's their ethnicity and also being poor, but there's going to be this like this backlash about that. And that may not be the case. I don't know if, they're justified in that. I mean, they probably are, but what I really got strongly was there's going to be this rage. There's going to be a rage about people that are not, that there's other people before them getting it when they really need it more. And I was seeing lots of images of guns, of people. I think like people are going to really go after getting lots of guns, and there's going to be I feel like there's going to be some kind of revolution. Like I was having memories of like revolutions or revolutionaries And I think that there's going to be groups of people that are like, they call themselves revolutionaries. Some of them may be like, I did see some people like with darker skin and tattoos. And so it may be like either from maybe inner cities or something like that, like people gathering together with guns. So that looked pretty intense. Now again, I have a little tend to over dramatize things. So, whatever I'm saying here, I could be totally off. It's really, I don't consider myself somebody to be, um, um, this is really the first year I've started to really try in advance to see what's happening globally or on the news. I mean, in the past years, every once in a while I might, but so I wouldn't say that I have well established track record yet of, how are my predictions, but I will say that right at the start of this, I was getting a sense of right in, I think it was like January or February when I tuned into it. I wanted to know, why were people in Italy, was the virus getting so bad? And when I tuned into it, I saw a group of people standing outside, and in between them was the virus. And what that told me at that time, the virus was in the air. And at that, and on the news, they were saying, no, it's not airborne. You have to like touch it. It doesn't stay in the air. And my clairvoyance told me it does stay in the air. And I saw it in between people, and I saw it above their heads, about a foot or so above their heads. And even and outside too. So not like if there's, huge amounts of wind, but if they were just like standing still close to each other, it was still there. And so when I saw that I told my husband and friends this, like, we have to be careful because it is in the air. And of course, they argued with me and told me I was wrong. But then we soon came to find out that was true. So there's been a few things like that that I can say, okay, this was verified so far. So we'll see what happens with these predictions. And I hope I'm wrong, because I'm an optimist. It's very hard for me. Oh, that one more thing was that what I saw even when I tuned in last night was there was an idea that life as it was will never be. Like, it would way in the future, people will point back and say, this is how life used to be, and this is how life is now. And I don't know if this is just in reference to like what already happened and has been happening, or if there's still going to be another event that even makes that even stronger. But we are not, I am totally, I would say 100% convinced of this, that this isn't a matter of, oh, 6 months from now, we go back and life is just how it always was before. We're never going back, like whatever that reality was. And not to say that whatever reality we're in moving forward is ultimately a bad one. Like, I'm not saying that, although I have some ideas about that. So I guess I'm trying to be optimistic here, but just life as we know it has changed, and it will not be going back. And we need to, it's hard to grasp that, but yeah.
Yeah, it is, and I try to be as optimistic as possible, but I can sense a lot of the same things that you're saying. You can, if you look back, you can see a lot of these things kind of playing out, and there's an overall sense that there's something building that. Could make our future a little bit more difficult, but like you said, I hope you're wrong. I hope we're both wrong, and things turn out for the better. But I think that everyone should prepare for at least a little bit of difficulties in the upcoming years. Now, before you head out, is there any, I guess, maybe advice you could give people? You know, these are kind of troubling times. There are a lot of confused and scared people that don't really know what's going on or what to do. Maybe something that they could do in their own lives to make it a little easier for them.
Yeah, well, definitely like just anchoring into themselves and who they are, and um, meditating. Um, there's meditations that I find to be really helpful, um, and I would say bringing like the idea of connecting with one's own life force, or um, at all times being aware, like what vibration are you running, and what is your own vibration, and what are you plugging into and tuning into. And we can choose to tune into what makes us feel good, or we could choose to tune into what is upsetting. And I mean, this is not, I mean, people already know this, but just a it's just a reminder, um, we could um, we could spend the hour watching the news, where we want to be informed, yes, but after we've just watched 2 hours of news, it's just repetitive. Or we could sit there with music we love, we could go running, we could go, there's still beautiful areas everywhere. Like, we have to, what are we feeding ourselves? And we have to remind ourselves of that. And then there's meditations that I really like to do that really help me clear my mind, release stress. There in my first book, You Are Psychic: The Art of Clairvoyant Reading and Healing. I call them the meditation tools or psychic tools, but grounding, running energy, centering. These are lifesavers. And we're not going to be able to avoid getting upset and getting pulled into other dramas and whatever's happening. A lot of people have good reason to be upset right now. They're very anxious about money. But I think that you remembering that we have the ability to manifest for ourselves, that we can unplug. And just because it sounds like life is terrible out there for so many people, we have the ability to use our thoughts and our visualizations and our emotions, and to craft our lives and the world around us through our actions, and also through these different types of mental exercises. So I am speaking to like concepts like the law of attraction, and power of positive thinking, which isn't just sitting there like just thinking happy thoughts, but it's actually going through processes to keep visualizing what you want, and then following that up with actions. So the other thing I would say is everyone needs to have a skill. People need to have skills that make them useful. So whether your skill is like editing, or your skill is proofreading, or your skill is a physical something, you work on cars, people ultimately, we can lose everything. But as long as we have, some use of our bodies, some use of our minds, and we have skills, then someone is always going to need help with something. So whether it's we're going to get paid or we're going to barter, you're going to feel a lot more confident in your life if you know you have a lot of different skills that people would want. And so for anybody that doesn't feel like they have those, start to get those. You don't have to go through big, long college courses, but can everybody who's listening list out 5 things that you do really, really well, and or maybe you do somewhat well, and then go and take some months, study everything and become an expert in that, and whatever it is. So from writing to physical work, there's a lot of need for. My husband's a mechanic, and I can tell you, like, he could easily be busy every single day of his life with so much need. So that's where you have confidence that no matter what, you'll be okay. Yeah, your bank account needs to be within yourself. It can't just be on the outside, because then there's always a risk for someone to take it away, but they can't take away, what's on the inside.
That is very well said. Debra, thank you so much for coming on tonight. That was such fascinating information. We kind of barely scratched the surface of some of this stuff, so I'd love to have you back on in the future.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great. I love talking to hosts like you who are so knowledgeable, and you've been around all of this for so long yourself. So I would love that.
Awesome. Now, before you head out, for those that are interested in finding out more about your books, your work, give them any websites or social media, anything else like that they can find you.
Sure, thank you. So my website is Debra Katz, DebraKatz.com, or letter U, letter R, psychic.com. And then my books are on Amazon. I have a new anthology or trilogy it's called The Complete Clairvoyant, and it consists of my 3 books. And yeah, I also have a book that's going to be coming out in the spring that is called Associative Remote Viewing: The Art and Science of Precognition for Sporting Events, the Lotto, financial predictions, and presidential predictions, something like that. That's the working title, but working on it with a friend right now. And we're tracking all sorts of success cases by all these different psychics and remote viewers we know around the world. So that'll be something to look forward to in the future.
Definitely. Deborah, thank you so much again, and I'll be looking forward to talking to you in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take
All right.
care.
Until next time, everyone else, you have an excellent evening.
Bye, everyone.